others.
I have.
Streamed from it, drenching the grass for 3 yards in front of him. By the time the flow had stopped, the man's eyes were staring sightlessly in the direction of the lagoon. Ezio closed them for him and crossed his arms on his chest. "Requiescat in pace," he said solemnly. Then he hitched his sword belt tighter. He had also strapped the guard brace to his left forearm, but had left off the double-bladed dagger attachment. To his right forearm he had attached the poison blade, always so useful when faced with huge odds. The pistol, most useful when a single, certain target was in view, as it had to be reloaded after each firing, he kept in his belt pouch with powder and shot, and the original spring blade as backup. He pulled up his hood and headed for the wooden bridge which connected San Pietro to Castello. From there he made his way unobtrusively but quickly down the main street in the direction of the arsenal. He noticed that the people around him were subdued, though they went about their daily work as usual. It would take more than a local war to stop the business of Venice entirely, though of course few of the ordinary citizens of Castello could know just how important for their city the outcome of this conflict was. Ezio didn't know then that it would be a conflict that would drag on for many, many months, indeed into the following year. He thought of Christina, of his mother Maria, and his sister Claudia, and he felt himself to be homeless and getting older. But there was the creed to be served and upheld, and that was more important than anything else. No one, perhaps, would ever know that their world had been saved from the dominion of the Templars by the Select Order of Assassins, which had pledged itself to opposing their evil hegemony. His first task was clearly to locate and, if possible, free Bartolomeo d'Alviano, but getting into the arsenal would be hard. Surrounded by high brick fortified walls and containing a warren of buildings and shipyards, it stood at the eastern limit of the main city, and it was heavily guarded by Silvio's private army, whose numbers seemed to exceed the 200 mercenaries Agostino Barbarigo had told him of. Ezio, passing the architect Gambalo's recently built main gate, wandered round the outside perimeters of the buildings as far as they were accessible by land, until he came to a heavy door with a wicket gate built into it, and, observing from a distance, saw that this unobtrusive entry was used by guards on the outside when they changed shift. He had to wait unobtrusively for 4 hours, but at the next shift change he was ready. It was baking hot in the late afternoon sun, the atmosphere was humid, and everyone except Ezio was torpid. He watched as the relief soldiers marched out through the gate, which had only one guard, and then followed the mercenaries coming off shift, bringing up the rear and blending in as best he could. Once the last soldier was through, he cut the throat of the guard posted at the gate and slipped through it himself before anyone had noticed what was happening. As had happened years ago at San Gimignano, Silvio's force here, big as it was, wasn't sufficient to cover the entire area it guarded. It was, after all, the city's military focal point. No wonder Agostino couldn't wield any real power without control of it. Once inside, it was relatively easy to move about between the wide open spaces between the huge buildings, the Cordelli, the Artiglieri, the shot towers, and above all, the shipyards. As long as Ezio kept to the dark, late afternoon shadows and took care to avoid the patrols within the vast complex, he knew he would be all right, though naturally he remained extremely vigilant. Guided at last by the sounds of merriment and mocking laughter, he found his way to the side of one of the main dry docks, into which a massive galley was drawn. On the side of one of the dock's massive walls, an iron cage had been hung. In it was Bartolomeo, a vigorous bear of a man in his early 30s, and so just 4 or 5 years Ezio's senior. Around him was a crowd of Silvio's mercenaries. and Ezio thought how much better employed they'd have been patrolling than triumphing over an enemy they'd already rendered helpless. But he reflected that Silvio Barbarigo, Grand Inquisitor though he was not experienced in matters of handling troops. Ezio didn't know how long Bartolomeo had been chained up in his cage, certainly for many hours, but his anger and energy seemed unaffected by his ordeal. Given that he'd almost certainly been given nothing to eat or drink, this was remarkable.
"Luridi Kodar, the filthy cowards!"
he was shouting at his tormentors, one of whom, Ezio noticed, had dipped a sponge in vinegar and was pushing it up to Bartolomeo's lips on the tip of a lance in the hope that he'd think it was water. Bartolomeo spat it away.
"I'll take you all on, at the same time, with one arm, no, both arms, tied behind my back. I'll fucking eat you alive!" He laughed. "You must be wondering how such a thing could be even possible, but just let me out of here and I will gladly demonstrate. Miserabili pezzi di merda!"
The Inquisitor's guards howled in derision and poked at Bartolomeo with poles, making the cage swing. It had no solid bottom, and Bartolomeo had to grip hard with his feet on the bars beneath to keep his balance.
"You have no honor, no valor, no virtue."
He summoned enough saliva into his mouth to spit down at them.
"And people wonder why the star of Venice has begun to wane?"
Then his voice took on almost a pleading tone.
"I'll show mercy to whomever here has the courage to release me. All the rest of you are going to die. By my hand, I swear it." "Save your fucking breath," one of the guards called out. "No one's going to die today but you fucking turd bag."
All this time, Ezio, sheltered by the shadow of a brick colonnade that skirted a basin where some of the smaller war galleys were moored, was working out a way of saving the condottiero. There were 10 guards around the cage, all with their backs to him, and there was none other in view. What was more, they were off duty and had no armor on. Ezio checked his poison dagger. Dispatching the guards should present no difficulty. He'd timed the passing of the on-duty patrols, and they came by every time the shadow of the dock wall lengthened by 3 inches. But there was the additional problem of releasing Bartolomeo, keeping him quiet while doing so, and making quick work of it. He thought hard. He knew there wasn't much time.
"What sort of man sells his honor and dignity for a few pieces of silver?"
Bartolomeo was bellowing, but his throat was getting dry, and he was running out of steam, despite his iron will.
"Isn't that what you do, fuckwit? Aren't you a mercenary like us?" "I have never been in the service of a traitor and a coward as you are."
Bartolomeo's eyes glittered. The men standing beneath him were momentarily cowed.
"Do you think I don't know why you've chained me up? Do you think I don't know who your boss Silvio's puppet master is? I've been fighting the weasel who controls him since most of you boys were puppies suckling your mother's teats."
Ezio was now listening with interest. One of the soldiers picked up a half brick and threw it angrily. It bounced harmlessly off the bars of the cage.
"That's right, you fuckers,"
Bartolomeo yelled hoarsely.
"You just try it on with me. I swear, once I'm free of this cage, I'm going to make it my mission to sever each and every one of your fucking heads and shove them up your fucking girly asses. And I'll mix and match the heads too, because you little tykes clearly don't know your heads from your asses anyway."
The men below were getting seriously angry now. It was clear that only orders prevented them from stabbing the man to death with their pikes or shooting arrows at him as he hung defenselessly above them in his cage. But by now, Ezio had seen that the padlock which secured the door of the cage was relatively small. Bartolomeo's captors relied on the fact that the cage was hung high. No doubt they intended that the harsh sun of the day and chill of the night, coupled with dehydration and starvation, would finish him off, unless he broke down and agreed to talk. But from the look of it, that was something Bartolomeo would never do. Ezio knew he had to act fast. An on-duty patrol would pass by very shortly. Releasing the spring on his poisoned blade, he moved forward with the speed and grace of a wolf, covering the distance in a matter of seconds. He scythed through the group and had sliced death into the bodies of 5 men before the others knew what was happening. Drawing his sword, he savagely killed the rest, their vain blows glancing off the metal guard on his left forearm, while Bartolomeo watched open-mouthed.